The Civic Si is finally here and taking on all challengers. And over here, in the orange corner, from Korea, is the Elantra Sport, which measures up to this Honda in almost every category. These two cars measure up really well. They both are sized about the same, they make about the same amount of power, and they're both designed to be sporty, but also very usable compact cars. Let's start with the Elantra Sport, which showed up about a year ago, and I was pretty impressed with it then. Using the 6th generation Elantra as a base for this sport model, this car gets a turbocharged engine, a completely revised rear suspension setup, and a really nice sounding exhaust system. That revised rear suspension setup is probably the most important part about the Elantra Sport. Now you can push this car into corners and it won't just feel like a simple compact car. It'll actually reward you for trying to have fun with it. In addition to that suspension setup, the car also has really nice high-performance rubber around each of those 18-inch wheels. The steering is another important part to bring up in this vehicle. It's probably the best steering that Hyundai has come up with, and it's pretty nice, if a little light and vague. But that can be said about so many modern steering systems in cars today. On the road, this engine feels really peppy and fun. The 1.6-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine makes 201 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque. It also sounds fantastic, like a naughty little rally car. I love that. And the transmission is pretty good too. Hyundai must have benchmarked Honda's past transmissions in developing this one, and it is really slick to use. It's also worth pointing out that you can get this car with a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic, so if you don't like rowing your own, you have an alternative. The complaints I have about this car in terms of its powertrain involve how flat it feels after the peak horsepower and torque numbers hit. It just falls flat on its face and it's not really fun to wind out. And in addition, the exhaust system can get a little bit drony on the highway. The brakes have been beefed up over the normal Elantra, and you've got bigger rotors in the front and rear of the vehicle. So overall, this is just meant to be the fun-to-drive Elantra sedan. Truthfully, I quite enjoy driving this car in almost any situation, although it is a bit loud and I kind of wish it had a limited slip front differential, as the car struggles to put its power down sometimes out of the corners. And the interior is cleanly designed. The infotainment system is one of the best in the business, and I love this D-shaped steering wheel. The leather seats are also awesome and supportive. There's other sporty accents in here too, like the gauge cluster, and the build quality is fantastic. The Hyundai also costs just over $22,000, and fully loaded, it'll set you back just under $25,000. As you can tell, I really like the Elantra Sport. It sets a really high benchmark for vehicles in this class, and it sets a whole new standard for sporty Hyundais in general. But let's jump into the Civic and see how that fares. Now we're in the Honda, which is the first factory turbocharged Civic Si that Honda has ever built. And this car uses a 1.5-liter turbocharged engine to make 205 horsepower on 192 pound-feet of torque, which means it has slightly more power than the Elantra, but a little less twist. Yet, for whatever reason, this car feels so much faster than the Hyundai. Highway speeds happen in this car in just over 6 seconds, which is slightly faster than what you'd get in the Hyundai, and this car gives you a ton of torque right in the middle of the power band. It feels fantastic. The one thing I will complain about with this powertrain involves the sound that this car makes. In comparison to the Hyundai, this thing sounds like a lawnmower. But let's get to this transmission. Unlike the Elantra, you can't get an automatic in the Honda Civic Si, but this is one of the best manual transmissions I've ever used. It's so buttery and slick. Throughout the Civic Si, there's a ton of technology that really helps enhance the driving experience. For example, there's different drive modes, which change the suspension, the throttle response, and the steering feel of this vehicle. That's right, a Honda Civic Si with standard adaptive suspension. That's awesome. As a result, driving this car in the sport setting really feels rewarding and engaging. But if you leave this car in the comfort mode, it won't feel all that different from a regular Honda Civic. Brakes have been beefed up in this car as well. It has bigger rotors When compared to the Hyundai Elantra, it also has stiffer stabilizer bars, which really helps it feel really responsive. It also has a variable ratio steering rack, which is a little lifeless, but very quick. One of the low points when it comes to the handling of this car comes with the tires. I found these 18-inch all-seasons to actually squeal a bit when you push them on the on-ramps, which is really weird for a sporty car like this. And finally, one of the best pieces to the Honda Civic Si is the limited slip front differential, which really helps you put the power down without a lot of torque steer. In fact, there's almost no torque steer in this car. It's important to bring up the fact that the Civic is just so much bigger than the Elantra. It's about 3 inches longer and packs in more legroom in the rear seats, and a bit more cargo room as well. Adding into the practicality factor is the fact that the Civic is much more fuel efficient, earning 32 mpgs compared to the Hyundai's 25. Where the Civic falls flat is with its design, both inside and out. I can't stand the look of the new Civic, and the interior, especially the infotainment system, is a complete mess. I do like the digital gauge cluster, but that's about it. Also, the cloth seats in here are a bit simple in comparison to the upscale looking leather thrones in the Hyundai. It feels like Honda mailed it in with the interior trimming of the Civic, which is a bit of a letdown. Price-wise, the Honda swings in at $24,775. The Elantra Sport is a compact car with attitude, but the Civic Si has a split personality. It can be driven in anger and is fun and fast, but can also be driven a bit more conservatively. It's the car I'd choose.